Have you ever looked up at the stars and just had that feeling of, wow, the universe is so huge and I'm so tiny? Why is it that I'm worrying? Why is it that I'm so afraid of things or want things to happen a certain way when ultimately I am just a speck of nothing in a huge, vast, open sea of nothingness? But recently I realized that that's not the only place or space where I can get that feeling, because actually there are other things that give us this sense of just liberation or peacefulness. But I think first it's important to understand, why do we actually look at the stars? And is it because we want to see these small twinkling lights? Because if you think about it, it's the same as you could put small LED diodes in your ceiling and look at those, and that would kind of be like looking at stars. Or you have the lights on your television. Why don't we get that same feeling when we look at the LEDs we have in the ceiling, or at the light coming from our TV or from your telephone? Why doesn't that give us the same feeling? I hinted at this before, and it's the contrast. Is that we stop for a minute, and when we see this vast sky and we see the stars, if you just see it like that, it still looks beautiful and open and spaciousness and expanding. But when we think about, wow, every single speck of those dots on the sky, that's a star, and very likely there are planets circulating that star, and possibly there are other civilizations out there looking back at us through the stars and thinking, wow, the universe is so vast, and we don't even know about them, or what's out there, we have no idea. And when you get that contrast, it seems as if though we just automatically expand. And expansion is the opposite of contracting, of feeling dense, tense, distortion and tension, or this pressure of me, I'm so important. So just by looking up at the sky, it gives us a feeling of calmness or peacefulness. What we're really after is not the small dots in the sky, it's the feeling of, I am not as important as I thought I was. I am okay just as I am. I don't need to become a certain way, or I don't need to do all these things I make myself believe that I need to do to feel happy. And the contrast between that, of me being so small and the universe so large, so huge, there's just so much out there, and it really gives you a perspective of, oh, maybe after all it was not that important that internet didn't work today, or that I didn't got as many likes as I wanted on my Facebook post. In the end, those things aren't really what we're after. This is not an intellectual understanding. I don't think about this as philosophy, as in us understanding, okay, we're this big, and then in comparison, this is how much larger the universe is. No, it's a feeling. It's a letting go of this tension which we identify with as the sense of self. And it's not just gazing at the stars that give us this feeling. Yesterday, I was at the physiotherapist, and I met an old woman sitting in the waiting room. I had just been out walking. It was so calm and peaceful outside. It's Sweden right now. It's sunny. It's spring coming. And the nice thing about having winter is that you can feel the change for spring, the contrast of having cold, damp, grey, rain, just slushy snow. We don't get much snow where I live. We do sometimes, but most of the time it's just slushy snow. So the contrast when spring comes and you have all the green coming from the trees and sunlight, and the feeling of, oh, there's this smell in the air, it's spring. It's just it's a nice feeling. It's difficult to not be happy when you're in that. So I had been out walking, I came in and I sat down, and there was an old woman sitting next to me, or actually in front of me, and she was holding her telephone and looking at it with a magnifying glass. And it looked so cute when she did that, because it was big letters to begin with, but then that was not enough. So she had to have a magnifying glass to see what was there. And I sat down, and, Swedish people, we don't really talk to people randomly, even though I tend to do. But this woman was different. She just looked at me and she said, oh, hello. I don't understand. I missed this message. Somebody called me, and she looking and doing like this. And I asked, do you need help? And I walked over, and she said, yes, I missed a call. And then we clicked, and we found out it was her child's child. So that would be her great-grandchild, who had called her from Finland. And I barely said anything, and she just launched into this whole story about the grandchild, how proud she was of her, and how she had 2 grandchildren with that, so her great-grandchild, and how she had 2 great-grandchildren from that grandchild. this is getting complicated. And she explained how one was 6 years old and the other one was 3. And I said, wow, that's amazing. My children are 5 and 2 almost. And it's almost the same. It's just that these are my first children. For her, it was her child's child. And just, again, we're talking about this contrast. That just made me stop and think, wow, that's insane. Imagine she's gone through not just having kids, but then gone through being with her kids when they had kids. And now she's gone through being with her kids when they have kids who have kids. And it just made me think, oh, okay, as a father, I constantly think about how can I be a better father? What can I do to make sure my child grows up? I don't really care about my child being successful and becoming, making a career. That's not what I'm after. I want my children to be happy. The most important thing for me is that I help to raise them so they're not so affected by everything that happens around them, and that they have this kind of inner stability, that no matter what happens around them, they can be happy. So it really gave me contrast when I heard her talk about that. And she launched into a story of how her grandchild had met her husband in some survival camp way up north on the border between Sweden and Finland. And it was just such a sweet, genuine story, because I think today we lack this contact. We lack genuine feelings. We see TikToks or we see movies and everything's so stylized, controlled and made to line, and you have scripts you read and you have everything made to give the biggest emotional effect that you can get by listening to this, and everyone's competing for your attention. But here was another human being actually opening up to me and telling me about her life story, and the best part was it was real. It was her story. It was not something she made up to get attention. She was just sharing of what had happened in her life. It made me stop and think, maybe I don't need to stress so much to get home and do this thing or get away and do that thing, or maybe if things don't work out the way I want them at work, that's fine also as well. Like, all these things really don't matter, because in front of me there's a woman who, I don't actually know her age, but she looked to be pushing 90 or something like that, at least I would guess. And she was so accepting, she was so peaceful. And I think even when you look at YouTube and look at all the spiritual teachers, there's few people who can gain the peacefulness and the calmness and just acceptance of reality being the way it is, as watching an elderly person who has come close to the end of their lives and have accepted that. Because it's not just about living life and doing all you want to do. I mean, in the end, we are all going to die. That's just a fact. We can't get away from that. And I think in society today, we see it as almost like a failure. Talking about death is obviously a failure, because when you die, something happened, or there was a disease and we failed. The disease took us over and we died, or we grow old. Actually growing old and dying is almost frowned upon, because everyone wants to be younger. Everyone wants to be more successful. But accepting and going through life and understanding that we're going to die, that is something that feels like we shun away from it. We show people on movies, they get younger and younger. The main characters of every movie, they're becoming so young. Someone said that if they continue this trend, eventually there's going to be babies saving the world. Well, actually, there probably are movies about babies doing that. So just like watching the stars gives me this feeling of, it's okay. It doesn't matter so much. It's okay just the way it is. We're fine. Just enjoy life. Talking to elderly people has always given me this feeling of, it's okay. It's going to be fine. Because when I look at them, I see them accepting and thinking about how they've lived their life. They've lived a full life. Many people have gone through the World War, or they still remember those things. And yet for us, it's so difficult to not get aggravated when something doesn't go exactly like we wanted. Whereas for them, if they could just have another few years, they would be thrilled. Just the fact that they're still alive is a gift. And we don't see it like that, because we need to become millionaires. We need to become successful. We need to have the perfect partner. We need to have the perfect children. We need. But actually just being happy and enjoying is something that's difficult. And I do think that growing old, if you're lucky, can give this to you. Unfortunately, it's not like this for everyone. There are some people who grow old and just get really grumpy and regretful and angry at the world or at themselves because they didn't do what they think they should have done. And I think it's worth noting that even though I don't teach a lot of Buddhism, I don't consider myself a Buddhist, even though I lived as a Buddhist monk for several years. In Buddhism, one of the highest gifts what's considered the highest gift is to be able to die a peaceful death. No anger, no fear, and having a calm mind. Not because of external circumstances being a certain way, but it's an internal state when you accept your mortality and when you accept that your life is over. That's seen as a beautiful thing in Buddhism. I think this goes so perfectly in line with what I teach, because I only teach one thing, one belief I have that build everything else upon that belief, and that belief is that there is a sense of self that is causing all these issues, and it comes from the belief of how we want things to be and how reality is, and when they don't match, we create this tension. From that tension, we create the sense of time, and we create all these different problems for ourselves that come with the sense of self, this pressure, this tension that I am here. And for elderly people, they just naturally seem to understand this and let go of it, because for them, they have whatever time they have. If they have today, then they're very happy, but they don't actually know if they have tomorrow. Whereas we just assume we have tomorrow. Well, of course we do, but we don't know that. So in a way, I think many elderly people live more in the present moment, or the now, or this slice of now, as I like to call it. They really genuinely seem to appreciate the now more than most of us do. So if it is that this sense of self, that is the whole background to the problem, comes from resisting and distorting towards the world around you and inside of us, how do we know when we're not doing it, and what does it actually lead to? Well, it does lead to something that I call non-centricness, meaning not feeling a sense of me being here. It's often called non-duality, or other words have been used to describe this. It's a description of a feeling and an experience more than a concept and a ideal that you're trying to live up to. And I actually made a video, if you're interested in this, that describes, as I said, the feeling and the actual experience more than the thoughts and philosophies and ideals that people build upon then feeling those feelings. So if you're interested in learning more about that and how you can bring that into your daily life, I suggest you watch this video here next.